In Toronto, M. Singh's bag is taken off the Vancouver flight and moved onto the Air India jet. It's put into a luggage container that's eventually placed at the front of the jet, right behind the plane's electronics bay. As the plane sailed over the Atlantic Ocean, the crew had no warning that a bomb was ticking down to disaster.
They want about 30 custom seals.
Customs?
Yeah, custom seals to seal the bar before its arrival.
When the force of the blast hit the floor of the jet, it pushed it violently upwards. The thin fuselage would have been blown apart. The air pressure inside the plane would have rushed out, tearing passengers from the cabin and fatally crippling the jet.
The debris scattered over 9 miles is an indication of how rapidly and how fearsome this whole decompression was. But in this instance, the aircraft completely didn't stand a chance of flight. There was no way of continuing flight in this case.
As the jet fell towards the sea, the forces put on the fuselage tore it apart.
It would have a tail torn off and the wings would start breaking. And there's no way of sustaining flight after that. It goes into gyrations. Once it goes into gyrations, there was just massive structural failure.
After months of painstaking work, investigators believe they have unraveled the cause of the Air India crash. They've proven a bomb brought the plane down. It's now up to police to find the bombers. But with so many deaths, and so many more possible if the Narita bomb had exploded in mid-air, there's immediate interest in making passenger jets safer.
This was one of the biggest disasters in the Indian aviation history. And it could have been avoided if the procedures were in place.
As the hunt for the killers continues, extraordinary steps are taken to tighten security and to see if jets can be made to withstand the force of a bomb. It's May 1997. More than 10 years after a terrorist bomb destroyed Air India Flight 182. An out-of-service 747 is about to take part in a remarkable test. 2 bombs are placed in the front cargo bay. 2 more are put in the back.
Well, the burning torque test was actually intended to prove 5 years worth of research, that we can protect an airplane using hardened luggage containers or hardened liners in the cargo hold.
The plane is also pressurized to simulate the conditions a jet would encounter at cruising altitude.
Pressurization is the key to that kind of experiment. The added energy that you have from the pressurization inside the airplane adds to the damage. You can think of it as a balloon. If you take a pin and you put it in a balloon that's uninflated, you get just a simple hole the size of the pin. However, if you blow that balloon up and you hit it with a pin, it pops catastrophically.
When the bombs are detonated, the result is devastating.
The force of the blast plus the pressure inside the jet just tore the plane apart. And that's the closest we can come to seeing what would have happened to a jet in flight.
The destructive power of bombs on jets is well known. But what the tests at Bruntingthorpe showed was that relatively simple measures can substantially minimize the damage caused by an explosion. One of the bombs in the rear cargo hold was placed in a normal luggage container. But the bombs in the front cargo hold were different. One was placed in a specialized container strengthened with a material similar to that found in bulletproof vests. The other was put in a normal container, but placed beside walls that had been reinforced with a blast-absorbing liner. When the bombs explode, the front of the plane is virtually untouched.
we had no breach of the airplane skin with the liner or with the hardened luggage containers. But towards the rear of the airplane or the tail, where we didn't have any of the hardened materials, it was a catastrophic failure for the airplane.
The standard luggage container did nothing to minimize the blast. Both the protective lining in the front cargo bay and the hardened luggage container were able to absorb the force of the explosion.
It's only speculation, but would steps like these have saved Air India? Very likely. Would they make the industry safer today? Absolutely.
Despite the dramatic results of the tests in Britain, hardened luggage containers are not used by world's airlines. While effective at stopping bombs, they're extremely expensive.
The hardened containers are not in use now because it's just not economically feasible. The containers cost the tens of thousands of dollars just to purchase, and they're very fragile. They're composite materials, so if you run into the side of them with a forklift, they're pretty much useless from that point forward.
There have been significant improvements made to the way that passenger luggage is screened at most international airports. More sophisticated color X-ray systems using multiple scanning beams are now used.
But I am indeed confirmed. Wait, I'll get my brother. He'll tell you.
Oh, okay. I'll check it through. But you have to check with Air India when you get to Toronto.
And there are stricter regulations about luggage getting sent forward on connecting flights.
In the case of Air India, the most important thing of all was passenger baggage reconciliation. This is the key to detecting an explosive device or a terrorist. No plane leaves with baggage unattached to a specific passenger inside that plane. And that must be so.
Your seat is 10B.
I think one of the most difficult piece of news for the families to accept was the many ways in which this tragedy could have been prevented. I mean, it was absolutely unforgivable that a bag could be interlined to another destination without a passenger accompanying it.
The quality of training that security guards at airports get also came under scrutiny during the years after the Air India crash. It's still an area of concern for some security experts.
There's a real failure to train security personnel. And that failure is because you cannot pay rent-a-cops subsistent wages to look after your security when you get on board an aircraft.
In the Air India case, police eventually traced the bombing to Sikh extremists living in Canada. They're fighting to have an independent Sikh homeland created in India. The man who confessed to assembling the bomb is sent to prison. The man suspected of masterminding the plot is killed several years later while under arrest in India. Both men had deep ties to Canada's West Coast Sikh community. It's a connection that still bothers Lata Pada.
It was a deliberate act of terrorism, and hurts even more that they were executed by Canadians on Canadian soil against Canadians.
More than 20 years after the destruction of the Air India flight, the shock of the day is still fresh. And many questions remain unanswered.
We still don't know who the two people were who checked in the bags. Apart from the basics of who made the bomb, we don't know much about who else assisted them. We don't know who picked up those tickets.